that this is the power you can drive from here or there. But actually the source of their powers is the constitution. And the both level of the governments get their power from the constitution. And this is actually a very brief concept of the federalism. So please next. So if we talk about a viable federation, what sorts of the characters a viable federation should have, that the next correct. The major principles of the viable federation must possess that there should have been a supremacy of constitution. The constitution prevail all the society, and no other thing should be above than the constitution. And a second prerequisite for a viable federation is that there should be a bicameralism, but in a upper house, here is the Senate, that should have the more powers. In a US, the Senate has the more powers, and it has that's why it is called as one of the model federal structure in the world. So the bicameralism, the Senate that must have the more powers. Here in Pakistan, the Senate cannot actually move and discuss the money bills. So here are the limited powers, because the Senate is for the administrative units. Senate is the representative body of the units where all the provinces have their equal representation. However, in the National Assembly there is a based on population, but majorly the Senate, that is a representative of the provinces. If that is the powerful, then the provinces would be also powerful, and that signifies as the symbol of the viable federation. So other thing is that there should be actually the judiciary. The judiciary must be an independent that can that has to decide the disputes within the center and the provinces, and the disputes also among between the provinces. So there should be some sort of the umpire which has to deal with the problems between the states and the state and the center. So the independent judiciary should be a symbol for a viable federation. So these are basically the characteristics for a viable federation, and we have to look at the Pakistan, how what type of a federation Pakistan is. Can you next? So next. Natural federalism in Pakistan is actually Pakistani federation is called a quasi-federation. Quasi-federation means that it is some sort of a pseudo-federation, it is some sort of the half-federation. Some principles in the constitutions are written, but in its letter and spirit, they do not exist in Pakistan. So the principle which I discussed with reference to the characteristics of the viable federation, they actually do not exist in Pakistan. So Pakistan, with its inception, actually became an authoritative state, and the policies, the discourse which British India introduced in subcontinent, that was revived in Pakistan actually. So since its inception, as Talbot has identified in his book Pakistan a New History, so the freedom of press, the prevention detention, and 1935 Act was also actually revived, and in that particular act there has been a discretionary powers to the governors, and which further were also utilized to blockade the democratic system in Pakistan. So also the Prodo, the act particularly which was used in the initial years of Pakistan to particularly to limit the politicians' power and to blackmail them, and in this particular regard, that particular outlook of federal governance of the Pakistan became authoritative. So, the, in this regard, the authoritarianism was actually not was developed that there should be only the one language, there should be only the one culture, there should be only. This was a particular thing that federalism doesn't suit, because federalism is the name of diversity. Federalism is the name of accommodating the different cultures, to understand the different states' history. So, in its inception, Pakistan became a different state, some sort of authoritarian that doesn't qualify the features of the viable federation. So, can you next it? So, relationship between democracy and federalism is very deep, and I understand that the federalism cannot survive without the democracy. So, for a survival of the federalism, there must be a consolidated democratic system in a country, and the democracy also rests with the political parties, it rests with the political culture and civil society. So these must represent the democratic system. So look, in Pakistan, we have seen that the challenges of a democracy are of the question of civil military relations, and the constitution, which I talked earlier about, that there should be a supreme law, and it should have been a supremacy of constitution. But in Pakistan, the 4 times the constitution have been violated, and constitution is understood as to be an agreement between the center and the provinces. However, constitution cannot protect itself, then how the provinces and their culture, their history, their questions they are represented would be actually protected. Next. So, federalism and the freedom movement. So, there are a lot of debates about the emergence of federal system in subcontinent, and some are of the view that it was emerged with the colonial policies, the acts which British India introduced in India. And however, the some view, likely the Catherine Edney, we listened her yesterday. So her also work is on the federalism of India and Pakistan, comparative studies. She argues that the federalism existed in India in medieval times, when there was the Mughal dynasty, and where the provinces have also, where there were the states, they have also a decentralized structure, they have their own autonomy, and so on and so forth. But if we look at very concisely, that the federal demands emerged in also a Lucknow Pact, which was actually the collective demands collective demands of the Muslim League and International Congress for the self-home rule and other things. So those demands actually also the carries the provisions of the federalism and provincial autonomy. There was also demanded the division of powers between the center and the provinces. And later on, in 1914, British India introduced Montague-Chelmsford reforms, which also introduced diarchy, and that has also the divisions of powers. So I may precise the discussion that in British India, Muslim League and the Congress both were actually were talking about the federal form of government. But their disagreement was on the residuary powers. Their disagreement was about the nature and the design of federalism in India. So the Muslim League's question about the demand of federalism was that it should be actually the provinces should have the more powers, the residuary powers should rest at the provinces, and the Congress was of the view that the powers should rest at Muslim League was of the view that powers rest at the center. So can you next? Can you next it? Sindh wala aisa jo hai na wo. Okay, central Sindh relations are the center's relation with other provinces. We also highlighted earlier that in the beginning of the formation of the Pakistan, institutions were also going to be established. So there were the problems that there was the only Muslim League, and which actually monopolized the claim that it has founded the Pakistan, and it did not encourage other political regional forces to have to talk and to discourse and to make the policies. So that particular monopolized role of the Muslim League led other provinces and the provincial political parties at a distance, and this particular thing actually make the deficit of the Pakistan democracy federalism. Can you next it? So this is attitude we can look at in the leadership of Pakistan, that the Liaquat Ali Khan was saying the provinces are the mere administrative units, and so many things we can find out. However, the struggle, the freedom movement of the Muslim League was based on that there should have been a federal political system in India, and Mr. Jinna's vision for Pakistan was like that. But after the formation of Pakistan, their discourse totally changed and the policies totally changed. So one question which erupted of the language controversy, the Bengal, and that emerged. But at that particular stance and level, the smaller provinces were very neglected, and their discourse, their talk, they were their languages, which were actually the 1,000 years older, they were not even considered in that particular policy. And the major thing for the Sindh was that when Pakistan was founded, so Karachi was made its capital, and Karachi at that time was serving the capital of Sindh as well as the federal government, and the Karachi that was actually separated from the administration of Sindh province and was added into the federal territory, and that was opposed at national and the party Muslim League provincial party level, and Sindh assembly opposed it. However, it was actually separated, and Sindh suffered particularly. And we called about the word federalism is that center is not authorized to intervene in the political and the domain of the provinces. But here the territories were actually snatched out, and that deprived a particular province very harshly, and it changed its democracy and demography also. So again, next it. Please next. Second thing is of that even when Karachi was included in the federal territory, its compensation was not given even. So that was calculated, but that was not given. No any penny was given in its compensation. Next it. So there is an example that in British India, Shimla and Delhi served the dual capitals of the British India, Calcutta, but in Pakistan they didn't survive. Next. So another major factor was of the influx migration in 1947, even emergency was imposed to allocate the heavily population into smaller provinces and like Sindh also, and Sindh was imposed to allocate about 3 lakhs of the population, and that also changed the surface of the city of this Karachi, and that was the major city, and it impacted a lot on the Sindh. Actually, I am of the view that if Karachi has been in its real position, the feudalism that have ever lasted, that would be also ended because of the influence of the Karachi people over there. But that was actually snatched after the one unit that the Sindh merely became a commissionerate, and that was a very disaster with respect to the federal perspective. And that's it.
What about the strikes that the one minority groups used to do, and the whole Karachi was seized, and the establishment had to make the decision to shift the capital to Islamabad?
This is actually the latter times that the capital shifting is another matter, and I think I have to conclude. So, representation of Sindh was also matter. When Pakistan was formed, there was a central cabinet in which for 3 months there was no representation from the Sindh. There were the 7 ministers. Among them, there was none of them was from Sindh province, and they were the initially making the policies, and those were also the making the state institutions, in which there was not representation of the Sindh. Can you next it? So Qaid-e-Azam fund was also, and there was also a Ayub Khodo's fund, but Ayub was also asked to stop the fund because the Qaid-e-Azam fund was affected, and both funds were for the rehabilitation of the migrants. And Qaid-e-Azam fund, from the Qaid-e-Azam fund, Sindh was given nothing, but even the Premier's fund was also stopped. When Ayub Khodo resisted, his ministry was also dismissed. As in Capi, in the initial years, the ministry was dismissed, and that was a particular federal and democratic authoritarian nature of the government that particularly adopted, and which actually which had its everlasting impact on the political history of Pakistan. So conclusion की तरफ आ जाएं. So conclusion is that we do not have actually heard the other opinions. In the Western world, in the developed worlds, there are particularly the scholars, there are actually the think tanks. So the policies of the governance, federalism, the particular specialization are framed by those, and states get help from those. But here in Pakistan, we have neglected the major provincial level political parties, and one particular institution on its dictation policies are made. So this is thing that as initial years, the problems of Pakistan as were in the initial years as those are continued in these times are the same. So the major factors behind them are also the same. So we have to, if we have to change the situation, if we have think of the Pakistan, so we have to change. We must have to change our approach. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you very much, Dr. Shaoor, for presenting a very good paper. And I have a question. You rightly pointed out in your conclusion that there is no room for alternative opinion in this country. And on the state level and down to the institutions and also